Welcome to this JetShip Worldwide presentation, Importing Goods into the United States in 2025. My name is Timothy Burns, licensed customs broker with decades of experience in global cross-border shipping. In this presentation, I'll review the key issues that every importer should be aware of when importing goods to the United States. While each section is bookmarked for easier navigation, I recommend taking time to view the presentation in its entirety. It takes around 20 minutes or so, and it helps you understand not just each subject, but how each subject relates to each other. To assist with further research, an accompanying PDF with the reference links is available on our website or in the description below. And finally, before we get started, if at any time during this presentation you find it useful and informative and you think, man, this is some really good stuff, please hit like. It helps me and it helps us deliver this valuable content, and we really appreciate the feedback. I've updated this presentation to include the ongoing changes in 2025. Now, unless you've been living under a rock or somewhere on Mars, you know there's been a flood of new tariffs announced frequently by the Trump administration. They've been announced and then retracted and announced again. And anyway, there's a lot of them. And while the tariffs ostensibly relate most directly to import duty, most all areas of import are affected. This includes tweaks to some rules, as well as greater enforcement of existing regulations. Understanding key elements for importing are more important than ever. Compliance with these new tariffs, and broadly for all import regulations, is the responsibility of the importer of record, which is defined commonly as a person or entity who owns the goods at the time of import. This designation comes with the responsibility of being well informed, a concept U.S. Customs refers to as informed compliance. While using a customs broker to make a customs entry on your behalf is not mandatory, most importers opt for this route to facilitate the process. You can choose to authorize a broker per shipment or establish a long-term partnership for all your imports. Having a professional broker by your side is probably the best option if you import regularly. In any case, whether or not you choose to use a customs broker, you, as the importer of record, have the ultimate responsibility for compliance. A starting point for importers is completing Customs Form 5106. It may appear complex at first, but actually it's fairly straightforward. And while the importer can directly submit the form to Customs, it's most often done via a customs broker. Commercial invoice. If there's one key takeaway from this presentation, it's the critical importance of having a detailed and accurate commercial invoice. Along with a bill of lading or waybill, this is the most fundamental of all shipping documents. Data is taken directly from this document for customs entry and classification. Versus a typical invoice, commercial invoices for importing require more complete address details, including such things as the buyer's tax ID number. The cost should be broken down per unit, specifying the currency and shipping terms. But perhaps the most overlooked aspect of commercial invoices for cross-border trade is the description of the goods being imported. Descriptions should strike the right balance between not being overly vague by, for example, using broad descriptions such as car parts, clothing, machinery, or samples. On the flip side, the description should not be overly specific, using some wonky, widgety thingamajig wording for some obscure industrial part that no one understands. The Goldilocks or the right solution is to provide both a broad, widely understood description that everyone would understand, along with more specific industrial type details including material content, product features, and characteristics, and the intended use. A final note on invoices. If the invoice is for wearing apparel or the goods are from China, you must also include the manufacturer's name and address, even if you purchased it from a third party. Export declaration. Although not a U.S. requirement per se, you should be aware that an export declaration is likely necessary for the goods you're receiving from another country. The information necessary for an export declaration usually mirrors the requirements necessary for import to the United States. Note that a packing list may be necessary, and that the tariff classification for export likely differs from the U.S. classification. And finally, most shipments from Canada to the United States do not require an export declaration. Harmonized code and tariff classification. The description of the goods provided in the commercial invoice we just discussed is necessary for classifying the items for customs entry using the Harmonized system. Ideally, the commercial invoice should include the Harmonized code. But let's step back and delve into the Harmonized system itself. The Harmonized system is a universally acknowledged method for categorizing almost every item imaginable. Everyone involved in international shipping should have a basic understanding of this system. The Harmonized system can be compared to a sort of encyclopedia, with chapters, headings, subheadings, and footnotes. And there are rules on how to translate your product description to the corresponding Harmonized code. This is known as the General Rules of Interpretation, or GRI. The most fundamental of these rules is determining the essential nature of your goods. Basically, you have to take the description of your product and convert it or translate it into a 10-digit tariff classification. The accompanying PDF includes links to our video on Harmonized classification. What's changed in 2025 is the increased importance of what's called Chapter 99 provisions. This is where the rubber meets the road with regard to the myriad of tariffs announced by the Trump administration. These are commonly defined in regulatory language using such terms as Section 232, Section 301, 122, 201, etc., IEEPA, punitive or countervailing tariffs. Within customs systems, these tariffs are implemented via Chapter 99 classifications. Chapter 99 classifications link to classifications from the previous chapters. We will show this graphic later on the section on duty, but it applies here as well. Basically, when the online schedule is properly updated, there will be footnotes or notations referencing how the goods might qualify for a Chapter 99 tariff. So a few recommendations on how to find an HS code. The first is review the online resources, including the ones we have online, and just basically become familiar with the fundamentals of classification. If you're importing or exporting, everyone should be aware of this system. Also, you can ask the seller if they're likely familiar with tariff classification if they're already exporting goods to the United States. You can consult with your customs broker if you have one, a customs attorney. And also, you can ask for an advance ruling from U.S. Customs, which we'll discuss in the next slide. But keep in mind that tariff classifications as they relate to Trump tariffs are changing almost daily, and then they're being implemented, then retracted, and they can be affected by such things as material content, country of origin, where they ship from, etc., etc. As mentioned earlier, an incredible resource to consider is getting an advance or binding ruling from U.S. Customs. By providing complete product details, Customs will respond with a definitive binding tariff classification. The response time is usually within a month, but it can be between a month or two. Securing an advance ruling provides greater certainty as well as a legal safeguard for importers, especially in this era of great uncertainty. Country of origin. With free trade agreements, especially between the United States, Mexico, and Canada, some assume that from where goods ship is equal to their country of origin and they can benefit from duty-free import. However, from where goods ship is different than their country of origin. Country of origin most often refers to the country of manufacture or from where the goods were quote-unquote wholly obtained. For example, if you ordered goods from Mexico that were made in China, even though they're shipping from Mexico, the country of origin would be China, not Mexico. For countries sharing a free trade agreement with the United States, which we'll discuss later, the country of origin can offer duty-free import. Also, some goods from Caribbean and African countries can benefit from special duty rates as well. And even though the country of origin as it relates to where the goods are manufactured is still more impactful, from where goods ship has taken on greater relevance with Trump tariffs. In some cases, a tariff might apply based solely on from where the goods ship. Declaring a value. In the majority of cases, the correct value to declare for import is the transaction value. The transaction value is simply the price you paid or will pay for the goods. In other words, the value on your commercial invoice. The best practice is to include the CIF value on the commercial invoice. The term CIF refers to breaking out the cost of the goods, the C, from the insurance and freight, the I and the F. U.S. Customs does not consider shipping costs as part of the transaction value. Breaking out the CIF values on the commercial invoice helps ensure you do not pay duty on the transport charges. And note that while U.S. Customs excludes transport costs for the value for duty, it considers other items that may not necessarily be included on the invoice. For example, if your goods required special packaging that was charged separately, that should be included as part of the transaction value and value for duty. In some cases, transaction value is not so clear, or there's no direct transaction such as importing samples or receiving warranty parts. Remember, there's no such thing as zero value when it comes to customs. In such cases, the cost of identical goods or similar goods are the following methods used in determining the value. Each method of valuation follows in hierarchical order. Note that the intercompany transfers and transfers between related entities complicates things, not just for import, but also has tax implications. In such cases, what you may consider as a true transaction value would likely not be acceptable to U.S. Customs. If you're importing e-commerce goods, you may have heard the term first value rule. It's a way to declare a lower value than the transaction value. It's a bit tricky, I would say a lot tricky, and not something that I recommend, but as there's a lot of discussion around this theory lately, I thought it worthy of a mention. Import duty and fees. Most commonly, import duty is determined by the three fundamentals we just discussed: tariff classification, country of origin, and value. The tariff classification and country of origin determine the percentage to apply to the value for duty. Multiply the rate of duty times the value, and you get the amount of duty. Pretty simple. Duty rates most often fall into what's called Column 1 duty rates, consignments from countries with normalized trade relationships with the United States. Note that while the rate of duty is most often expressed as a percentage, what's referred to as ad valorem, it can also be per number of units, weight, or volume. The column for special rates most often refers to imports manufactured in a country sharing a free trade agreement with the United States, again, which we'll discuss later. But now, it's important to consider the previously obscure Chapter 99 provisions of the Trump tariffs. So while the general theory is still applicable, what's changed is the increased relevance of Chapter 99 provisions. The Trump tariffs in Chapter 99 are overlaid or linked to tariff classifications from the previous chapters. Take this example. An importer may have heard of tariffs on aluminum and wondering if this applies to recycled aluminum they plan to import. Usually, these import duty-free under Tariff Classification 7601.20.90.75 and can be confirmed in the tariff schedule. Yet, notice those pesky little footnotes we referenced earlier that in the past may have referred to some obscure provision. Well, they are anything but obscure. As pointed out in these footnotes, these goods are subject to Chapter 99 countervailing, anti-dumping, punitive tariffs. When properly updated, the tariff codes subject to punitive tariffs link to Chapter 99 provisions. The chapter notes referenced in the footnotes are incredibly important to understand the ifs, ands, or buts of the new tariffs. Relevant factors can include such things as from where the goods ship, their country of origin, free trade status, material content, and date of entry. While the U.S. Harmonized Schedule Online remains a great resource, it alone should not be considered definitive. Import duties are coming and going faster than the ability of the various systems to reflect such changes. Furthermore, the regulatory language regarding the ifs, ands, or buts are challenging even the most experienced professionals. To make sure you're assessing the correct duties, we recommend working with your customs broker as their systems interface directly with customs. And whenever possible, we always recommend to get an advance or binding ruling from U.S. Customs. Contact our team for a consultation and to access our extensive resources. Keep in mind that duty is just one of many, and often not even the most significant, of total import charges. Even if importing duty-free, other import fees will apply. Likely charges can include such things as a merchandise processing fee, harbor maintenance fee, customs brokerage, entry bond, inland transit, and storage. And I wanted to note A collateral impact of the higher duties is having to post a higher level surety bond. Typically, the level of surety equals 10% of the duty paid over the 12-month period. However, higher duty rates means a higher level of bonds and financial scrutiny by the surety company. Free trade agreements. The USMCA is by far America's most impactful free trade agreement, with massive trade volumes between Mexico, the US, and Canada. But keep in mind that the U.S. has free trade agreements with many other countries. These agreements facilitate trade in both goods and services. For merchandise or goods, the key advantage is duty-free import for originating goods. And these agreements have general rules of origin that outline how goods can qualify as originating and thus for duty-free import. There are also specific rules for specific categories for such things as automotive parts and textiles. The new Trump tariffs are challenging and sometimes negate free trade advantages. However, most qualifying originating goods can still import duty-free. Visit trade.gov for more details. Types of U.S. customs entries. Generally speaking, U.S. customs entries can be broken down into two broad categories, informal and formal. An informal entry applies to non-restricted goods with a value less than $2,500. Goods valued over $2,500 and restricted goods of any value require a formal entry. This includes imports requiring approval from partner government agencies, which we'll discuss later. Although technically an informal entry type, de minimis or Section 321 can be considered another entry type. It applies to non-restricted goods valued under $800 that previously benefited from duty-free import. This can include packages shipped via various postal systems that are imported and delivered by the USPS. This method will be severely limited in 2025, especially as it relates to imports from China. This entry type also includes packages shipped via FedEx, UPS, and DHL via express clearance processes. Contact our team for information on some independent express facilities. It also includes non-express and non-postal import clearance via either a container freight station or what's referred to as Type 86. Access to these processes will be limited and the programs themselves may be eliminated. Either way, Section 321 de minimis entries are subject to great change in 2025. An important point regarding customs entries is that time is of the essence. Once your goods arrive at a U.S. port, you have 15 calendar days to make entry. Often, storage charges start to accrue even sooner, as fast as within 12 hours of arrival. Exceeding these deadlines can be extraordinarily costly. It's best to understand the clearance processes prior to importing to avoid these costly delays. Another key takeaway from this presentation. And, if you haven't already done so, please hit like. Again, we appreciate your feedback. Partner government agencies. Often, customs clearance, believe it or not, is the easy part, as an entry awaits approval from a partner government agency. Each of these agencies have unique requirements regarding such things as prior notice, certifications, and licensing. The final key takeaway from this presentation, especially for first-time importers, is to make sure that everything is in order prior to shipping, not just for customs, but also and especially for partner agencies. International shipping options to the United States and getting logistics support. The best way or mode of shipping depends primarily on the size and weight of your consignment and shipping volume. Local post options are best for sending personal shipments and the occasional e-commerce volume. Large e-commerce volumes and business-to-business regular orders can benefit from zone jumping processes direct to the United States. For heavier packages, FedEx and UPS ground are the preferred options when shipping from Canada and Mexico. From Europe and Asia and other overseas locations, FedEx, UPS, and DHL air options usually have the best value. Trucking within North America and sea freight from overseas locations are best for larger commercial orders. These are some of the factors our team considers to find your best shipping options. Jet Logistics support includes managing and supporting your logistics activities to and from the United States. If you ever ask a question, wouldn't it be great to have a partner with international expertise and transparency? Well, now you do. JetShip Worldwide. Contact our best-in-class logistics team for rates and global project support.